Hey guys, so we're going to talk about evolution by natural selection. So we're going to talk about natural selection, which is one of the main mechanisms of how why evolution happens, okay? And this idea of natural selection actually was brought about or proposed by Charles Darwin. After his trip on the HMS Beagle back in 1831, he went around the world in 5 years. He actually made it to the Galapagos Islands, and he did a lot of collecting of plants and animals that he took back with him, and then he started analyzing what he collected. Okay, so again, where he was or where he got a lot of the data was here at the Galapagos Islands. So a lot of the data that actually helped him come up with his uh, theory of natural selection, okay, or his mechanisms. And 2 points that he actually brought about that's or proposed was that species were not created in their present form, but evolved from ancestral species. So, saying that things change over time, things evolve, and they evolve because of natural selection, right? That's the mechanism that he came up with to support the idea that things do change over time. Okay, he had 5 main points, to summarize what he wrote in his research is that one, populations have variations, and you can see that even in our classrooms. You can see that a lot of us have a lot of variations, different color hair, different height, a lot of variations. Some variations are more favorable, right? In nature, some variations allow organisms to survive better, to reproduce better, so that's going to allow their populations to be more successful, okay, when it comes to reproducing and staying alive. More offspring are produced than survive, and that's true. Some organisms have a lot of offspring, but not all of them survive because they don't have those traits or those variations that are going to help them stay alive, okay? But those that survive have those favorable traits, and you can see those traits because they're surviving, and you can tell that that trait or that characteristic is allowing them to survive better, okay? A population will change over time. Well, that's evolution. That's just because of natural selection, and we'll define what natural selection is here in this slide. Okay, natural selection is a process where individuals with favorable traits are more likely to leave more offspring better suited for their environment, meaning that if you have the traits that allow you to survive longer and you're able to reproduce more than the other organism, then you're going to be selected naturally, right? Your alleles will stay in the population at a higher frequency than those that cannot reproduce, okay? If you have two individuals and one is really fast and really strong, the other one is very slow and very weak, but the weak organism can reproduce 20 times as much as the fast organism, well, eventually that population will change to all these organisms being slow and weak because that's what's favored by the environment, which is also known as differential reproduction, right? The difference in reproduction in two different species or in the same species, but the one with the favorable traits will probably reproduce more and survive longer than the one that doesn't have those favorable traits. These pictures represent natural selection in a nutshell, right? These three birds, they love green beetles, so that's all they're eating, right? But when you go to this next generations, you see that green beetles are going down, but orange beetles are coming up, or they're going up in the population numbers, right? And eventually you end up with no more green beetles in the population. And that's because the birds, that's all they eat, okay? Now, if by any chance there's a mutation in one of these birds and they have new offspring that can start eating the orange bugs, then they're going to start eating those, and the orange bugs are going to go down. Their population will go down, and hopefully there's still some alleles in the population that can start producing green beetles so that they can reproduce again. But again, that's natural selection, right? The green beetles are getting eaten, and then they don't have the trait that allows them to survive, which is the tan color, so their population goes down, okay? Natural selection causes changes in the population and characteristics of the population, not individuals, okay? And these populations usually increase the species fitness or the survival rate. So they will survive longer, they will reproduce more, okay? This is not natural selection. This is an example of what natural selection is not. Just because an organism wants something doesn't mean he's going to get it, like this beaver here, right? they need to cut down some trees, so he wants a chainsaw as a hand, so he's going to get it. That is not natural selection. Natural selection is just happens by chance, and if that mutation allows the organism to survive better, then it's going to stay in the population, right? In this example, maybe if they had longer teeth, the longer teeth will survive better, and eventually the population will end up with organisms with huge teeth, right? But not a chainsaw. So that's what natural selection is not. Now, natural selection causes changes in the population by three things, okay? By varying the genes that are present in the population. And that's just mutations in the DNA, right? That causes organisms to change and have different traits. Remember, DNA produces proteins. Proteins control our traits, or how an organism looks like or has as their traits, right? Also, reproductive success, right? The ones with more favorable traits are going to reproduce more, so the population will change. Selective advantages, this has to do with the appearance, or what organisms use to pick a mate, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute, but that's how natural selection produces these changes, right? Through mutations, to uh, putting pressure on traits that are not favorable, and also on the appearance of organisms. Okay. Now, there's three types of natural selection. The first one is stabilizing selection, and this one favors the middle or of the organism. So let's say that we're looking at height, right? And this is just an extreme example, okay? But let's say that individuals that are 5 feet to 5'5", right, are going to survive, and they're going to stay in our planet. Those that are below 5 and above 5'5", they're not going to stay in our planet. They're going to get kicked out. Well, that means that natural selection, or the selection, was only for those in the middle, right? So our population would change to everybody being between 5 and 5.5, okay, or 5'5". Directional selection, what that is it favors one of the extremes. So instead of saying if you're between 5 and 5'5", now we're going to say if you're taller than 5'5", you stay in our planet. If you're below 5'5", you get kicked out, right? Or we can go to the other extreme and say if you're below 5 feet, you stay in the planet. If you're above 5 feet, then you get kicked out. That's what directional selection is. Disruptive selection is just the opposite of the first one we looked at. Okay, this one is favoring both of the extremes and not supporting the middle or the intermediates. Okay, so this just saying with the same example. If you're below 5 feet, you stay in our planet. If you're above 5'5", you stay in our planet. But if you're in between 5 and 5'5", we're kicking you out of the planet, right? So that's what this is saying. Those are the three types of natural selection. Now, natural selection, of course, causes evolution, and evolution causes speciation, right? And speciation is just the formation of a new species, and this happens because of two main reasons, right? Geographic isolation and behavioral isolation. Geographic isolation is just when two organisms are separated by something physical, right? Like the Grand Canyon. You can see these two squirrels here used to be the same species, but because of the separation in the Grand Canyon, they started living in different environments, different pressures, so they became two different species, and now they cannot reproduce, right? So they used to be the same species, but now because of the separation, they're two different species, and that's a speciation by geographic isolation, okay? The other one, another example is these trees right here, right? Something happened, maybe the plates move, and now we have a creek or a river running in between those trees, and it's big enough to where cross-pollination can't happen, so they become two completely different species, okay? And that's still geographic isolation. The last one that we'll talk about today is behavioral isolation, and this has to do with the way species behave, or the time of mating between the species, or how they look, right? This example here, this picture is from for a meadowlark, right? One of them lives in the west coast of the U.S., the other one in the east coast. And yeah, they look very, very similar, sometimes alike, but the ones in the west, right, do a different singing tone, or they have a different pitch than the ones in the east, so they don't mate with each other, okay? And that causes different selection of the birds or mates when females are looking with who they're going to mate with. Okay, so again, that causes speciation. That's natural selection. Let me know if you need any help.